When you're up against a hostile room of people who don't want to be there, you need real strategies that get results. Welcome to From Hostage to Hero, the show that gives you practical advice you can use right now in the courtroom, boardroom, or classroom. Learn how to move your unwilling audience to one that is invested in what you're saying, eager to participate, and engaged in the process. Learn from the attorney whisperer herself, your host, Sari Delamont.
Well, welcome everybody today to another episode of From Hostage to Hero. Today we're doing a trial debrief with one of my favorite attorneys ever, the famous John Bailey that you've heard me talk about a lot in the podcast. He's the Dram shop guy that I use the lots of stories from that case. And he's yet to bring me back out, so we don't have other stories to tell you. So that says something about him. But he is here today with his trial team in another Dram shop case win. They only got 40% on the bar, but the entire judgment was $262.5 million. So they're pretty happy about that. I'd be pretty happy about that. So welcome John Bailey, Pedro Leyva, and Chad Inderman. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Today to the From Hostage to Hero podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we're going to start by tell me a little bit about who you are as lawyers. Are you all in the same firm? How long have you been practicing? Do you focus on Dram shop cases? Let's just tell me a little bit. We'll have John go last because who cares about John? So Chad, we'll start with you. Tell me a little about yourself.
All right. So Pedro and I are law partners. We live and work. We live in Lubbock, Texas. It's out here in West Texas. So we're West Texans like John. But we office. We're maybe about 150 miles apart from John Bailey, and so Pedro and I have a firm with about 15 lawyers throughout West Texas and New Mexico. Do only PI cases, only catastrophic injury cases, and if we get any Dram shop case in the door, we use that as our excuse to get to work with John. So every Dram shop case that comes in, we work with John, and it's because he's great at them. He's spent a career trying to perfect them, but a lot of ways it's just because we love working with him. So and Pedro started as a law clerk with us and was just too good, and now he's one of the owners of the firm.
Oh, wonderful. Pedro, tell me about that. Tell me a little bit about your journey.
Well, started with Chad in the firm my first year of law school. And I told them that if he didn't hire me, I was still going to show up the next day to work. So kind of forced myself into the door. And now we're here. Been with the firm now going on 10 years.
I love it. That's wonderful. And John, tell me a little bit about your background, or tell our listeners, because I know your background. But
well, I'm a solo practitioner in San Angelo, Texas. Have a little bit of a cold today. But yeah, I mean, I work on a few cases a year, and it seems like a lot of those are with Chad and Pedro. And yeah, I mean, it's I think that's it. Not much more to it than that.
Why Dram shop cases? Why are you passionate about those and kind of the guy that everyone's seeking out? I mean, I know it's probably due to the From Hostage to Hero podcast, but other than that, what makes you passionate about Dram shop cases?
So one of my best friends from high school, I guess it was 20 something years ago, I'd started my own firm, and it may shock you, nobody wants to call you with cases when you don't know anything and you're right out of law school. And so anyway, this guy's named Amos Barton, and Amos, his cousin's dad got in a wreck and was hit by a drunk driver, and his guy bought some beer at a convenience store, and so he calls me, and I didn't have anything else to do. And my wife and I were actually going on vacation, and kind of one of these budget deals in Cancun where you pay the all-inclusive thing. And so I get down there, and there was like 50 Dram shop cases. And so I just read them all, and I called another lawyer that I know named Spencer Markle at the time, and asked him, how do you do these cases? Because at the time, most people didn't want to do them. For whatever reason, they didn't want to do them. And so that was my first entrance into it, and we got a pretty large verdict at the time on one, and then so people started calling me, and then I started realizing, I think it took a little while, but I realized that, there really can be an impact from this, not just a lucrative thing for lawyers, but that it really can help reduce drunk driving. And I think, when we worked together, you came up with the hook of, and the good ones do, bars and restaurants can help prevent drunk driving, and the good ones do. And I think that's just really true. I mean, it's not a situation where it's going to stop all drunk driving if the bars comply with the rules, but it can reduce it a lot. And the place where we tried this case is #1 per capita in the nation for drunk driving deaths. And
Wow.
so that was something that our client, aside from receiving just this financial help with his situation, that I think playing his part in his own community to try to help reduce drunk driving is important. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
it.
I think that also, and when you're like, I don't know why people don't try these cases as much, I think it's because they're afraid, that we're just going to blame the drunk driver, which of course is what we were up against in that one case. And so like, why even go up to the bar? It's always the drunk driver's fault. So that does make for difficulty, but as you have shown, it obviously can work, and especially even if they do give a percentage on the driver, when we get these big verdicts, that obviously still makes such an impact. So let's get into this. Tell me, give me an overview. Any of you can speak, whoever would like to, about this case. Tell me some details about what this case was about.
Yeah, I'll start that, John, if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this guy he's an oil field salesman, and he entertained clients out at golf courses, bars, just wherever made sense to entertain. And he goes out to the golf course and he's entertaining, and he has, over the course of the day, like over 10 or 11 hours, like in the 20s of drinks, drink count. And of course, he leaves the bar at like he plays all day, goes to the 19th hole or whatever they call it. I'm not a golfer, but anyway, goes there, drinks more with these guys that he's with. It's all on the company dime. He then leaves the bar and makes it like 2.4 miles. John, is that what it was? Something.
Yeah.
And he hits a line of stop traffic at a light. There's a red light, and he was so drunk he thought the light was green, and he lands on top of our client with his truck. Our client was stopped on his motorcycle with his helmet on, stopped in the line of traffic. This guy's truck lands on top of Isaac Sanchez, who was 32 years old at the time, and pins him under the truck, and leaves him paralyzed from the neck down at 32 years old. So
Oh my
that's
goodness.
the case, and in a nutshell. And then we began peeling back layers that John or Pedro may want to talk about.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. What were you up against, i.e., how are they defending this? And let's talk a little bit about some of the issues you were up against in this case.
So one of the things we're up against is that the bar didn't keep any of the receipts, didn't and claimed not to have any surveillance. But the bar was located on a municipal golf course. So the bar had a deal with the city. And so we subpoenaed the city. We sent a subpoena to the city and asked for any and all information they had, documents, and got some receipts back. So while the bar said, "Hey, we got a new system, we don't have any receipts," we did get receipts from the city that the bar had provided. And once we were able to look at the BAC and do the science, reverse engineer the drink count, we realized that we didn't have all of the receipts. We only had partial receipts, and through the testimony, we were able to kind of put that puzzle together.
And so how did you overcome that with not having all the receipts? I'm assuming we got blood alcohol level at the
Yeah.
scene.
Not at the scene. We had a blood alcohol concentration taken 3 hours after the crash. So with the help of a toxicologist, we're able to kind of reverse engineer that with the receipts we had, and also with some of the depositions taken, right? We took depositions of people that were out there, and while everybody was trying to, protect the bar, they would testify as, to pieces of information and that helped put the puzzle together, such as they were served, the group, including the drunk, were served not only at the bar, but were also served through the cart girl while in the golf course. And we didn't have those receipts, but we, had an idea.
Yeah, from through witnesses about what was happening. John, what were you viewing as kind of the big issues that you had to overcome here outside of the receipts, which we've just heard about?
So, I think a couple of big issues. So, one of the things that we did that I thought was really interesting is Chad has a ranch near here, relatively near here, and we spent time out there, planning and fishing and swimming and just hanging out. I mean, we did that literally in the days before trial. So, and we did it well before that as well. I think part of so one of the issues was this is a little bar. I mean, it's a little bitty bar. To say mom and pop, it's a little bitty bar at a municipal golf course. So this is not some fancy country club or anything like that. It's a very small bar. So that was one of the things that we hit. The other thing is the exact same thing that we spent a week working on, is this idea of responsibility, and how do you divide that, and my frustration with the law of it seems to me that the law should be, if they overserve someone, they're responsible for it, because how do you realistically, logically say it's this versus that? And I think that's part of the reason when you came out, we've talked about that, we talked a little bit off of that, it was irritating. I was irritated with you at first because I think I was irritated with myself of I wanted to figure out how do we unlock this puzzle, and in essence, if I'm being honest, trick the jury into or give them permission in order to do what we want, to get more than 50% on the bar. And I think I carried that with me in this trial. And so I think that was a problem. And I remember the week before this, when we were out at their ranch, we did some practice voir dire a little bit, or jury selection. And I just did a horrible job. It was just terrible. I mean, Pedro will tell you, Chad will tell you, it was a really, really, really bad job. I mean, I was arguing. It just fell into, I'm like arguing with these mock jurors, and they're my friends. And so, and I remember we were going down down to the lake, and I was with Chad, and Chad looked at me and he said something like, "Hey, it seems like this has a lot more about you trying to get this percentage than what we're really supposed to be doing." And man, it
Nice
was
work, Chad.
yeah, it was a very I used to not be this way, but now I don't know, 4 kids or just had life beat me. I mean, it was just one of those emotional moments where you face like, it's really that issue was something inside of me, was still a remnant of something that, we had worked on. And, as humility is something that's really challenging for me, of putting aside that arrogance, which is really just kind of an imposter thing, of trying to believe you're really great or whatever. And once I got past that, I think emotionally that was a real big deal for me. And
I'm
then
going to pause you there for just a minute. I'm just going to pause you there for a minute, because you've heard on the podcast that we talk a lot about letting go of the outcome, right? And that when we are asking jurors to allow money in their verdict, we're not asking for us, right? So you hear me say all the time, we don't want to talk about my client and my plaintiff. We want the jury to really have the ownership over that. So I'm so glad that Chad, pinged into this. Feels personal, because the minute that you go into trial and it you make it personal, right? I need this verdict. I need you to do this. The jury can sniff that out, and no jury in the universe is going to give you, plaintiff attorney, a verdict. They could give it to your client, but not to you. And so before you continue, John, I just want to go to Chad. What made you think that that was happening? What were you picking up on there?
Well, so John spent his whole career trying to perfect these cases, and he is an expert at them. And so we spent a lot of time as a group struggling with what was the truth in this case? Where was the truth, and how do we get there? And we admitted to ourselves, and I'm not taking credit for the whole truth thing. I mean, we should just know as human beings that we're supposed to be truthful, and as lawyers especially, we should know that. But John's the best at reminding everybody on the team that look, we're looking for the truth. And so we like hold up out in the middle of nowhere trying to figure out what the truth was. And so this was like middle of the afternoon, and John and I are going to go swim because we're tired from working all day. And that's what we'd do. We'd work and then go swim for 15 minutes and go
I
back.
love that.
And
I love that.
and John's, at this point in my life, John is a dear friend. And you have to have that sort of relationship to tell John Bailey that. And so I just told him, I was like, look, is this about you or is this about our client? Because it's okay if we don't get 51%, which in Texas is joint and several liability on this drunk. We want to, and we think that we know why that's appropriate, but it may not happen, and that's okay. And I didn't mean it to be like some like impactful event or statement or anything. I just wanted John to like take that pressure off of himself. And so that's all that I wanted, was just take the pressure off yourself. And so that was really all it was.
I love that. And I will say that I'm proud to be one of the people that can tell John he's full of shit on day 2 of knowing him, which is what I did the next day I came in. It was like, you brought me here for a reason, so sit down and let's do this. And then he was like, yes, ma'am. And by Friday, we were best buds. But so I love that. Let's talk about the 50% for a minute. So the jury found 40% only 40% on the bar. How did that affect the verdict besides just, you get 40%? Is there something that you lost out on by not getting it over the line? And I know every jurisdiction is different, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, if in Texas, we get to 51%, it's joint and several liability. There's a judgment for the entire 262 or whatever.
Gotcha.
So by being under 50%, we get a judgment for 40%, which is in this case 105 million. And so, I mean, it's still, like we want to get $1 billion. Our client, $1 billion
For sure.
is not enough for Isaac for what he goes through.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not enough. But at the end of the day, it was okay that it was 40% because the jury was trying to do right. We presented the truth, and it was okay. It was good. And I mean, and like John said, that problem is not our client's fault. It's not our fault. That's a legal issue that we just have to deal with under our law here in Texas, and it just is what it is.
Was there a criminal component to this case as well? I know there was in the drum shop case that we worked, John. What about here?
Yeah, and because of all the stuff that's happened in the Midland Odessa area, because of so many cases and criminal cases, the criminal case is still to be tried. So we tried this before his criminal case was tried.
And
So
I was asking because I know in the dram shop case, we talked a lot about this, and it was your idea, this idea of complete justice, right? Because he had already been sentenced. And so it was, that part was complete justice. We also need complete justice here. But we didn't get a chance to do that here because it was criminal case. So we brought up voir dire. Talk to me about, did you use H2H voir dire? How did you put your voir dire together?
So, I mean, the short answer is, how would you say it? and I may read you wrong on this, so I don't doubt that you'll correct me if I am reading you
You're
wrong.
not going to get in trouble, so go for it.
You're not going to make fun of my hand size again, are you? Um, so, so kind of the journey of, and I like to call it jury selection, and I think it's the first part of the trial. And so, when we first met, the journey that I began on jury selection began with, and I think Pat Montez, and Pat was kind of a disciple of kind of the Jerry Spence school, but she had gone and done tons of psychodramatic work, and she had kind of developed her own thing. And she was the first one that kind of got me in this idea of what already felt natural to me, which was, I'm gonna put a label, but I don't think that's really fair. I'll just call it inclusive jury selection. And so when I met you, and I remember this was at the very beginning before you had launched your entire ginormous brand. And I remember you were doing the little picture with the ropes and the chair. And you're like, this is gonna be a big deal. And I was like, okay, yeah. And now look at it. And so that idea of an inclusive jury selection, and so I don't know that, I think it could be boiled down to a formulaic idea, but I don't see it so much as that. I see it more as a, you know, I think you talked about filling the space, the size of the space, and I look at it and I know it just seems really weird and all the other things, but lawyers, we go and you got all the seminars and the books and you say this and you say that and you do this and you have scaled questions and you do all these things and there's all these tricks and plans and all this other stuff. And maybe that works for some people, but for me, it is, it's really the idea of love. And by love, I mean, wanting the good of the other person for the sake of the other person. That person is a human being that they could have avoided coming over there that day. I know they're subpoenaed, but everybody, whatever. And they showed up for this. And so to me, jury selection is much more about that, about loving them, about loving the judge, about loving the opposing counsel, about just having a real love for our entire team. I mean, we talk about, but there are Jocelyn from my office has just killed herself. Erica from Chad and Pedro's office killed themselves at night. We had I'll call him an appellate lawyer, but he was kind of like Yoda, Jim Hund, that was, he would come up with ideas and I would say, that sounds stupid, Jim. And then an hour later, that's what we're doing. And so, Don Jenkins did all the technology. So it was when you have love amongst your team, and then when you just deeply love your client and then go try to really just sit and feel what it feels like to not be able to use your legs and to use the restroom in a bag and not be able to hug or I mean, he had like 16 surgeries to be able to try to use his arms a little bit to hug his son. Just when you really live that and then you come in here and love these people, it just it's different to me. And it's there's no tricks, there's no manipulation. The judge, he did a great job with jury selection, but I think we could have had any of them, and it was a unanimous jury. And it was just, and I know it just sounds goofy. I don't think it sounds goofy to you, but I imagine it does sound goofy to a lot of people that are listening to this. But
I think what you're saying is, of course, exactly what we talk about, and when I wrote the book, which has been 5 years ago. Can you believe that? I remember when my assistant called me when you called her, and she said, this guy wants you to come to Texas for a week in September, and I was so busy, and I was like, just throw some crazy amount number at him just to make him go away. And she did, and you bit, and now I charge 3 times that much. But at the time, that was like a huge amount of money. But yeah, when I wrote the book 5 years ago, it was the thing that I kept not understanding about your world is nobody's talking about the journey of the jurors here. They don't want to be here. And on top of that, the way that y'all were dealing with that was getting in front of them and trying to figure out which ones you should kill first. And I thought
Yep.
seems backwards to me.
Right.
These people are there; they showed up, as you said, and I honestly believe that the majority of jurors, if not all of them, want to do the right thing. They have two questions: what am I supposed to do, and how do I do it? And when we come in with this aggressive, which one of you guys are going to kill me because I'm going to kill you first, it just throws off the entire vibe. And so the vibe, we don't necessarily call H2H inclusive voir dire because, of course, we get rid of jurors that are not right for the case. But it definitely is juror-centered voir dire, right? We're thinking about where they are and what they're thinking, and we give them so much power to tell us what the case is about and what is important in their communities versus us telling them and asking if they agree. Pedro, I haven't heard from you for a while. What was it like watching voir dire happen actually in trial? I'm assuming because I think John did do the voir dire and you were there watching.
Yeah. No, it was, I mean, John did a fabulous job. He got everybody talking. We knew a lot about a lot of the jurors. I think it just went really well. And I kind of tend to agree with what John said is, after he finished his part of the voir dire, I really wasn't scared for, whatever jury we got out of that pool. And I think it was a lot of just trusting them and getting them to talk. And, I think echoing about what you said, they were there and they wanted to do the right thing.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that, if I may say this about John, I think that was the big shift from our week together is he came in with the old exclusive still hanging on. And when I was like, just watch this, just try this and see. And I always, as I say in the podcast, I always remember that every single jury we had that week of Craigslist, Midland, Texas jurors in $100 million case, every single jury said, can we get more? After we did voir dire and opening. And so obviously it works. I think it's much more enjoyable voir dire to come in and just be like, where's my people? They're all my people as soon as they learn what this is about. So wonderful. Let's move to opening. Who wants to tell me about opening? John, did you do opening or who did opening?
Yeah. So I did, most of my work was front loaded. So we did, we had a very, if you call it strategic or what you want to call it. We spent a tremendous amount of time trying to, I'll call it a clarity trial. You hear speed trial, those types of things, but to really boil it down into its essence. And I know you talk a lot about this. And so, jury selection was, I don't know, hour, 2 hours, and the opening was 17 minutes. And we fully did the monetary ask and opening as well with the rationalization for it. So we probably spent 9 minutes on the case. But it became so clear, and I think, when people talk about just knowing it's your jury, and I've listened to there's a podcast. What is his name? Michael Callen. You know Michael
Oh,
Callen.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I know Michael well.
Pat Montez knows him well. And so there's a guy, and I've listened to several of his deals, and there's a New York lawyer, I forgot his name. He's kind of new. He talked about knowing it's your jury. And I just think it's, you can just feel that energy. And we were going to tell these people the truth, and we were going to love them. And they were going to, our client is an absolute real deal hero, and his parents give their lives to take care of him. And they talk about how grateful they are because the other people they saw in the center, maybe their son never got the trach out, or maybe he had a brain injury too. And just the gratitude that they had. And it just permeated the whole room. And so, I really believe that what we do, if we're willing to go inside ourselves and face those demons and love, we're always standing on the side of the right, but we can screw that up if we come in there with our fear, and perfect love casts out all fear. And I think that when you go in there with that, I'm not saying it's some trick to win every jury trial. I'm not even saying we should win every jury trial, but it doesn't really feel like it's a fair fight. Because it shouldn't
Not a
be.
fair fight.
It's
It's
not,
not a fair
right?
fight. Right? I mean, because y'all stand on the side of the right. And as you know, that I preach all the time. And absolutely, as I say, I just spoke at TLU and I was also in Kentucky. and I did the same talk, I said the jurors are biased. They're biased for you. They just
Yep.
don't know it yet because you stand on the side of the right. And most people believe that when you hurt someone, you should take responsibility. And most people believe that bars should count drinks, or, all the things. And so when we really, that's why I continue to try to root you in those truths, right? To go back to what Chad was talking about, truth. That's when you can have no fear. Now, I want to make sure that everyone listening is, if you're still fearful when you're going to trial, you're doing it wrong. It's a journey, as John has said and used that word, to get to the place where you can stand in front of that jury and stand in that truthful place. It's a journey, because this is a fear-filled system. That's how the system is built. You're going against the system. Chad, what were your thoughts on a 17-minute opening? You know that I preach 30 minutes or less. But most attorneys freak the fuck out about that. They're like, no, this is like a 2 to 3 hour minimum. What were your thoughts on 17 minutes?
We were all in on that, and just watching it, and I mean, so everything was very, was very calculated. Like, we knew what was going to happen when we went there. And I mean, we thought, well, the defense will do some stuff that we didn't anticipate, but we knew what we were going to do. And so watching John and I'm gonna back up a little in voir dire, because they went hand in hand, the voir dire and opening.
The trial dialogue, we talk about that a lot.
And so it's like, he's like and kind of making fun of John a little bit. I've told him this, is it was like he
I
was
love making fun of John.
he was kind of like doing yoga with them while he's picking this jury. He's doing yoga. He's like the yoga instructor out there. And there was no, he just didn't seem like he had an agenda at all with other than just like, let's just have a conversation, in voir dire. And there were 23 people that were excused for cause after that conversation. So then when we get to this 17-minute opening, they knew what the case was about. They just didn't know what the facts of the case were, and they needed to hear some facts. And that was really all they needed to hear, and know what they were there for, like what we're going to be ultimately asking for. And so he became like a cross in opening was more like a cross between the yoga instructor and the weatherman at that point, and so I thought it was great. If he had gone on for hours, our trial judge would have shot him, first of all, but also we didn't need it, and we would have bored the jury and turned them off. We tried a case that classically would have been tried in 2 weeks. We tried it in 4 days.
Oh, Coach Jody's going to love that one. She's all about the clarity trial. I know you've been listening to those podcasts, John. That's amazing. And as we talk about, when I say, 30 minutes or less, they're like, well, my case is really complex. And I'm like, well, then you're not ready to try it. If your case is complex, then you're not ready to try it. You've got to simplify it. But when we have these big, long openings with hundreds of PowerPoints and all, and the challenges section is the longest section, what we're saying is, this is so complex and confusing. And as Rick Friedman says, complex and confusion and ambiguity, that's tools of the defense. When we get up and we're like, it's really simple, folks, it's this, and that's it, then that really is very jury-centered again. Chad, you did the closing. How was that? Do you love closings? I know some people are like, I don't love closings. Other people are like, oh my God, I live for closing.
We split closing, so we get to go first and last in closing. And yeah, I enjoy.
You mean like rebuttal close? You have rebuttal close?
Rebuttal close, and John did the rebuttal. John did a great job with that. As far as my part of the closing, it was easy because I felt like the jury just wanted to know, like, what are you guys asking us to do here? What do you want us to do? And so I just stood up and said, we want you to do this, and this is why, and this, and this is why, and this, and this is why. And we weren't, I even admitted to him, like, look, some of these questions are hard. And not even like John and I disagreed on the answers to some of those numbers, and which damage was bigger than the other. And there was no consensus. And so I just admitted to them it's hard. But as we promised, we're going to show you how we came up with these numbers. And then it's up to you, and just do whatever you think's fair. And anyway, so
I think that's so important because, the big advice out there is don't tell the jury that it's hard. And my answer to that is always, it is hard. You
yeah.
just said it was hard for you. So why are we playing this game where it's like we struggle for weeks trying to figure out what the right numbers are. And then we're going to tell the jury, and it's like, this is really simple. It's not simple. It's hard. And one of the things that I have stolen from my time with John all those years ago is the conversation in the money ask, where we talk about how there's no book where you can look up, how much these things are. We're talking about non-economics now, but we feel the number that is correct is X because we've been on a journey with this family. Remember that, John? We've been on a journey, but now you're going to go on a journey and you may decide the number is different, and that's up to you. So really explaining that, yeah, there's no book that we were like, well, this is what, it's based on our journey. This is the right number, but you're going to now go on a journey. And
Yeah,
jurors,
and back to truth on that too. It just wouldn't have been true for us to say this is
right.
so easy. I mean, it would have just been false. And so after
Yep.
battling for the whole time, trying to remain true, it would have just been false. So
I
anyway.
love the truth torch that was just so present in this trial. Pedro, how was it working with the witnesses during trial? I know that you handled some of that. What were your insights there, if any?
So, like John said, we split witnesses pretty evenly, and I thought that was great. Not only because it would give us, break to prepare if we needed to meet with the next witness, but also because the energy would shift in the courtroom, right? So the jurors weren't listening to the same person
Same person. I
over and
love
over.
that.
And
Yes.
I never thought about it that way, but it'd be John and then it'd be Chad and then it'd be me. And it just kind of felt like it kept the energy up. There was never a dull moment, it seemed like, other than when the defense lawyer was cross-examining. But I thought that was great. And if, one of us needed to step out for some last minute prep before or to line up some witnesses. Then we always had two of us at council table, but I thought it was great, and I think going forward, that's the way I want to do future trials.
I never thought about that, the energy shift, because we talk about how trial is all about a management of energy and that jurors get bored. So that's fantastic. And I will add to that, it doesn't always work when you have three different personalities working on a trial, and which, again, John, I think will admit this, is one of the main reasons he brought me out all those years ago, is because it was three attorneys coming in and he was like, you need to help us work together. I remember him saying that that's almost more important than actually the trial work, is how are we going to work together on this? And obviously, John has taken what he learned there, and you guys go out to the ranch and figure out all your stuff. And it's so important that you take those breaks and really solidify your friendship in addition to what you're doing and the case workup that you're doing, because it then shows up in trial in such a beautiful way.
Absolutely. And we laughed because we talked a lot about, well, everybody has their own role and kind of stick to your role. And, that was kind of one of our themes. We each have a role and to be there. And when we interviewed the jurors, after the verdict, one of them said that. It's like, hey, y'all each had a role and played that
Oh,
role.
that's beautiful.
And so we thought that was pretty funny, but we had a lot of fun. We really did. We had a lot of fun trying the case and, trusted each other and just had a great time.
I love that. I hear that a lot in the RH2H world, is trying cases is fun again. John, you are the master at the number game, right? I think a lot of people, especially in your last case with the oil worker that was killed, wrongful death, we don't ever ask enough money for those, in my opinion, because we're like, what's money going to do? Jury's not going to give me enough, money for somebody who's dead. And especially the facts in that case weren't egregious. There wasn't even really a big piss off point. And yet in your heart and mind, and we did a podcast on this, 120 million was the exact right number. And 120 million is exactly what you got. Talk to me about how you come up with these numbers and how you as a team decided that. I'm not sure if 262 was your ask. I'm not sure what your ask was. But how did you come up with the ask?
So, I mean, at risk of sounding just unbelievably weird, which whatever.
Well, I love.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the way I see this, and I don't want it to, I'm not trying to lecture on anything other than just this is my journey. And so, uh, I believe that the invisible world is much more tangible than the visible world. And I think that um, we're taught in law school to um, focus on distrust and logic. Logically, you could lose every case. I always thought it's so weird that people say, okay, argue this side of it and now argue that side of it. Well, I want to dig to the point that there is no other side. There's only truth. Like
Yes.
when we did our opening, there was no embracing anything. We just told the story and trusted that they could understand that when this other stuff happens. And so, the first thing I think that has to be done is to, and I'm not that good at this, is when you and I first met, is you have to get your ego out. You have to not believe the nonsense, especially as you're part of trial teams where plaintiffs' lawyers never write numbers. So lawyers that keep saying, I got this and I got that, number one, it's not true. Number two, it's an imposter thing, and so that's first thing. You got to get the ego out. I think you have to work as a team. In that case in Big Lake, we had a great team. One of my best friends, Jeff Bever, he wrote the whole story. He tethered me to the truth. It was just there. I've got another trial coming up with a good friend of mine, Kate Browning, and it's the same thing. It's you have to love the people that you're there with, and I think that's first and foremost. And then you got to step in the shoes of your person. Like, we tried this over a month ago. I'm still sick. I'm still drained. Um, you have to, in my opinion, really feel it. And I'm not feeling it some emotional sappy. I mean, like literally get in your client's spot.
That
And
is your
just
job. You
feel it,
are
right?
their representative. I mean, that
Yeah.
is your job. And so many attorneys refuse to do that and make it an intellectual exercise. And I
And
think
it's not.
it's not.
And it's
And
not.
knowing you, John, you have this is where your ego absolutely serves you. You have enormous self-trust when it comes to the number and what the right number is. I don't know your process of how you get there, but once you get there, you trust the fuck out of it. And that is that, when I tell your stories, because I talk about you all the time, I'm obsessed. No. People are like, yeah, but that's Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas. And I'm like, no, it's because he has the courage to ask and believe that that is the right number. As you remember in the Dram Shop case, when it was 100 million, we would just practice saying that number all the time. We'd walk in and I'm like, you look like 100 million bucks, or it's 100 million degrees outside, or, whatever. We just said that number over and over again until we were just like, that is the right number. Pedro, Chad, what are your thoughts on the ask and how to come to the right number? Because I know that's really interesting to our listeners.
We
We
spent a lot. Go ahead, Pedro.
No. I mean, what we did was, and did several times with several people, is everybody fill in their verdict sheet, and we didn't discuss what we thought our numbers were, and it was, I did one, John did one, Chad did it, Jim Hunn did. I think John got Jocelyn and his wife to do one as well. And the funny thing is, we hadn't discussed numbers before. About 6 out of those 8 were really close to each other.
Amazing. What was the number that you end up asking the jury for?
It was John. I'll let
Yes.
you.
Yeah, it was 300, but what's interesting is then with a little bit of outlier, it was right in between 250 and 300, and the jury's number was 262. So it is in if we as a group, you have to do it as a group, in my opinion, and you go into that, I think that those questions, those existential questions are in the ambient environment. that invisibility is real, and it is real, and it's those types of things. If you look into your heart and then that interconnectedness of the team, you can see the number. I don't know if that
I
makes
love
any
it.
sense. You
Yes,
see
it
it.
absolutely makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the vibe you create, and then what's in the ether. We call it the level 3, right? What's in the atmosphere, and it's just amazing. It's really not amazing. It makes perfect sense that you all were so close on the number. I would talk to y'all all day, but we're going to close with what would be your biggest advice to anyone listening today after trying a case and getting this kind of a verdict? You know, every case changes a trial attorney in some way, better or for worse. What would be your advice? I'm going to start with Chad.
I've always, for me, it's hard for me to talk about this in a public forum, but for me, I've always not been as spiritual as I probably was raised to be and should be, and there just kept being evidence and sign after sign after sign that something bigger than us was involved here,
Mm,
over and over and over again. And I'm not trying to spin any religious thing here at all.
no, that's
But
makes
but
total sense.
I had to recognize what was going on, and you know, no matter how that jury answered the questions or what happened, I mean, it that was life changing for me, because there would just be something happening. You're like, that doesn't just happen. And then when you have this happen over and over and over and over again, um, and then the defense lawyer stands up and he says something, you're like, man, that's really good. I can't believe he said that, and I didn't think about that, and he may have us here. And then something beyond you comes over you and says, no, everything's good.
Mm,
Everything's fine. Don't worry about that. And it wasn't like me being tough or something. It was just something else. And so that I attribute it to God. Um, and that will change me after this trial, and it has. I'm changed.
yeah, and for those who, God means something different for everybody. I just feel like that this trust, the trust is what I'm hearing, and the release of I have to control this, and I should have thought of everything. That there's a release there that you were able to do and give it up to God or the group or whatever was bigger than yourself. I love that. Thank you, Chad. Pedro, what would your advice be?
Well, I was about to say trust. You
Mm,
summarized that, but no, I think the reason I had so much fun was because we trusted the jury, we trusted the judge, we trusted each other, we trusted our client, and so it was just a when I say fun, I mean it. I mean I had a
yeah.
lot of
Oh, I
fun,
think trial is the most fun anyone can have
and
in the world,
and I
but
think
we're all
that's
weird.
yeah, I mean, but I think that's the reason for it is just the trust, and everybody had a role to do, and we knew that we were accountable to each other, but we weren't worried about it, and I think that showed through, and the love for each other and for the family. I think that really showed. It wasn't. Um, we didn't have to put on any act. All of it was genuine, and we stuck to the truth.
I love it. John, closing advice.
Well, I I think first of all, I'm it really is encouraging that you're doing what you're doing. Um, uh, yeah, I mean it is, because we need more of that, of people that are, we're just so bathed in fear as lawyers, and then even stuff like this can come into, oh, well, there's these select few human beings that have fairy dust in their pocket and they get big verdicts and you're just an idiot, so you better send your case to them. Man, when that case comes in the door to you, whoever you are, that case came to you for a reason. And
Yes. Preach it.
and it doesn't, yeah, you got to learn how to put in evidence and all those words and stuff that I don't even remember much of anymore at times. I think it's just, it's just loving. It's letting go of the fear. And then when that happens, and we not worry, but we focus on who do we want to be? Who do we
Mm-hmm.
want to be? and then everything emanates from the being,
That's
right?
right.
And
Being
that's it.
informs doing.
That's
Always.
it. And so you don't have to worry about the doing if you get the being right, which, and I will say, I mean, and I get so frustrated with myself because, in this trial, there was and I'll give Jocelyn a lot of credit. In this trial, there was this lawyer, and I'm using my little flip chart, and I'm writing, and I'm doing my thing, and I'm very comfortable, too comfortable at times, and this lawyer keeps kind of snarking at me, move over, I can't see, move over here. And then finally he's like, I can't hear, and he's older, I can't hear, speak up. And so I turn and I put my mouth like this, like, can you hear me now? And I'm clearly mocking him in front of the jury, but it was me flashing, and I was very disappointed with myself. And afterwards, Jocelyn, who's worked with me since she was 17 years old, and she's really nice, and she calls me sir still after all these years. And she says, sir, I don't know how to say this, but you weren't you in that moment. And you should have been that what, yeah. And you could tell. And I was like, okay. And so in closing, the first thing I said is, I've known this defense lawyer for 24 years, and he and I don't agree on a lot, and we don't necessarily have the same code in life, but if his son had a problem in my town and he called me, I would go over there and drop everything and help him. And Jocelyn, I told the jury, I said, Jocelyn told me, hey, I didn't act the way I should have. And I apologized to him, and I apologized to you, because, I should have done better, and I didn't want that to hold it against him. And so I think just, this is a relationship. And when you try to really dig in there, you're going to be passionate, and you're going to screw up, and you're going to say things that you regret. And, just trust yourself. I mean, I really believe this work enables us to be better people. And we act like it's so challenging, and it is. But, real challenging are people out here that they don't know how they're going to pay their next bill, or they are struggling with cancer, or, where you really are having to dig deep inside of yourself. Trial, I think, gives you that. It's kind of like a safe way to do that. And
Yeah.
and
Well, Rick Freeman says trial work is personal work.
it is.
Mhm.
And that guy, by the way, anything he says is fantastic.
Wow. So
And
lucky
so,
that he was my first mentor. So trust the higher power, trust the jury and your team, trust yourself. Thank
yeah.
you so much to the three of you for being here and chatting with me. It's so much fun to be a part of, even a little bit of some of your successes, and have you share them here. I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for having us.
Have you ever wished that you knew what the jury was thinking? Well, grab a pen and paper, because I'm about to give you instant access to a free training I created for plaintiff trial attorneys called 3 Powerful Strategies to Help You Read a Juror's Mind. It's going to help you to understand what the jury is thinking, so you'll feel confident to trust them and yourself in the courtroom. Ready for the address? Go to sariswears.com/jury. Enjoy!